Hello, everyone. I'm back with an amazing story. I have author John Kennedy Howard here today, who has achieved many world-class credentials. For instance, the most impressive one I find, John, is you won the Hawaiian Ironman Triathlon in 1981. I'm envious of that. So, but you have, set speed records of 152.2 miles per hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1985. Would you have a rocket on that bicycle or something, or what's
Uh,
going on,
the, there's an old tradition of motor pacing in cycling. It was a big part of what Taylor did. He was an amazing uh, motor pacer. And you have to understand that what I did was sort of the evolution, and I trained a young woman to actually break my record. But what happened back in this post-industrial revolution period when bicycles were evolving into motorcycles.
Ah,
And that is so important to recall that period of time because the bicycles were getting well, for pace racing was very popular in the era. At first, it was multi-cycles, meaning tandems, triplets, quads. These were very heavy bikes for the most part, and they were able to generate pretty good speed with these multi-cycles. But there's a point of diminished return where the internal combustion motor was becoming more and more prevalent in the late 1890s. So what took place was the obvious. The bicycle was becoming a motorcycle, and the pacing on these bike tracks, which were initially designed for uh, uh, excitement and speed, but they weren't that big. They weren't half-mile circuits like the motorcycle tracks and automobile tracks of the near future. They were instead more like 250, 300 meters. Well, this became a problem, comma, big problem,
mm.
because they couldn't keep the bikes on the track, and the equipment was sketchy to say the least. Chains would break, spokes would snap, uh,
Tires would go
tires
flat.
would blow, and more often, well, I won't say that. I'd say that on several occasions, spectators, cyclists, and pacers ended their lives
Oh
on the
my
bike
gosh.
track. That's how dangerous it was. But for this reason, all the wrong reasons, in my opinion, this is why cycling was so popular. And going to a baseball game was like watching grass grow compared to what was happening on that track. So people went to these. I got Greg LeMond, the Tour de France winner, to say this in one of the endorsements in the book. Um, you went to the baseball game when all the seats at the bike track were sold out. That was literally the case. Uh, and they were frequently sold out. And so the tracks, there were over 250 tracks in the United States at the time. So immensely popular sport, as it was in Europe as well. The tracks were had a more permanent, for the most part, more permanent presence in Europe. They were cement or hard hardened macadam, and uh, for the first oh gosh, 20 or 30 years that bicycles were in existence, bicycle racing was the key sport. And certainly that was the case in Europe. And because of Major Taylor's commitment to never racing on the Sabbath, um, his promise to his mother on her deathbed, he was unable to secure a contract. Or initially, they wanted to pay him a king's ransom to race in Europe. But because, for the most part, this is not universally the case, but opera was popular on Saturday, bicycle racing, being a spectator at a bicycle track was the popular endeavor for Sunday. That's kind of the way the Europeans roll.
Hmm.
So they finally agreed on a contract which was much less than the initial offer to get Major Taylor, the world champion at the time, to Europe. It took them, I think, over 2 years to negotiate this. But the French promoter, Victor Brier, put the deal together, brought Major Taylor over, where he was an absolute overnight sensation. Everyone knew who he was. He couldn't even walk down the street because he was recognized everywhere he went. And he raced throughout the continent, all in every major city in Europe. He was there. I think the only exception to the rule, and this is part of a story that I tell in the book, he did not race in the UK, and there was a reason for that, which I won't reveal. Uh,
Uh,
but it's fascinating why he would refuse to race in Britain. But his presence on the track always filled the stadiums, no matter where he went. Um, and his racing against the top riders in Europe, initially because of the long sea voyage that it took to get there, and the fact that it was cold, and he always wore his African robe, which was his sort of way of telling the world that he was proud of the fact that he was African. And later, I think a lot of boxers started that same robe image. But the point I'm trying to make is that Major Taylor was a hit wherever he went in Europe. He competed successfully. He didn't win the early races because the fact that it was very cold in Central Europe that early part of the season, and he preferred it hot. He was from Indianapolis, so it took him a while to get his legs, and when he did, he laid waste to the top riders in Europe on their own tracks, which is
wow,
never
what a
easy to
story.
do.
That's amazing. Nothing like winning, on the competition's field. He must have been a very unique man
He was
as
a
you
humble
say.
man,
Mm,
Douglas. He never, at least that I can tell, and in talking to his daughter Sydney, he never held a grudge. He never was bitter about the way he was treated. He literally turned the other cheek, I suppose you could say, as the Christians would say. He believed that it was important to get on with his life, and he saw the greater mission was competing for a cause, and that cause was ultimately civil rights. And he knew that his career would not last forever, and nor did it. Uh, I have to say it didn't end well. Um, he died a pauper in Chicago, 1932, height of the Depression. So he was a believer in helping his fellow man to a fault, I think. He owned in his adopted hometown, by the way, was Worcester, Massachusetts, and in Worcester he owned quite a bit of real estate, and his fellow worshipers in the John Street Baptist Church. Um, I guess you could say really took advantage of him and didn't always pay their rent on time. Well, eventually those houses that he had went away,
Mm,
and his oh, I want to tell you also that he was an inventor, and he learned the art of um, tool and die manufacturing from his boss and coach, Bertie Munger, who was his first coach. Bertie stayed with him for his entire career, and Bertie owned a bicycle factory in Indianapolis, which eventually closed, and they moved the whole kit and caboodle to Worcester, Massachusetts, and that became a point of importance in Major's career because he learned how to forge, how to cut tool and die, and Bertie taught him a lot of this, and uh, he built some things that went on to become important, and I'll explain that. The first thing that he built was a stem, which was the how do I describe it? The gooseneck that held the handlebars to the bicycle frame. And his idea was to get as low as possible, take advantage of his size, who he was 5'6", 5'7", maybe at his tallest. Yeah, he used that advantage to slip through holes in the pack and win races. But what was important to him was the understanding, and he grasped it from the very beginning, that you needed to be aerodynamic in order to get there first. So when you're traveling 35 miles an hour on a bicycle, the wind is your single most detrimental factor. So what Taylor did was invent this stem, which allowed him to slide the stem forward for a particular type of race. Maybe it was a short distance event, and he would pull it back slightly for other types of competition. So the stem, he referred to it as the outrigger stem, became popular later uh, after his death, actually in 1932. It became an accessory that other racers used, but the white establishment of bicycle racers refused to use it because Major Taylor used it.
right,
And
of
so,
course. Mhm.
to their demise, he had the slipperiest position on the bike. And if you look at him compared to the other riders of the time, he sits 7, 8 inches lower than they did. Well, that made a huge difference in terms of aero flow. So he was an early pioneer of aerodynamic setups and positioning on the bike.
Well, what you're telling me is that he was really, really smart. I'll bet he was up there at a genius level. He was able to play
I
musical
believe that.
instruments. He could understand the center of gravity, wind resistance, and he manufactured and invented his handlebars where he would be a straight line profile cutting through the air. And I guess his elbows weren't sticking out as he was going through the pack. That,
Exactly.
that's an amazing story. Listen, hold that thought. Have you got a copy of your book handy?
I do indeed.
Hold it up against your chest. That's a beautiful cover. Hey, everybody, you can get it at www.majortaylorstory.com.
Right now, it's in Barnes and Noble. It's an Amazon bestseller. It's in all formats: hardcover, softcover, ebook, and now Audible. So we got all bases covered.
We'll be right back after this.